Over the years, speedrunning has had its share of players that faked runs or were caught cheating using one method or another. One of the earliest instances of cheating took place in the Mario Kart 64 community between 2003 and 2005, and went undetected for the entire duration without any suspicion of wrongdoing or misconduct from community members or the moderators. For this video, we're going to look at the timeline of events, as well as some of the more common methods of cheating to see if we can find any inconsistencies that would have outed the cheater. Finally, to make things more interesting, I'm not going to reveal who the cheater is right away. Instead, I'd like you to try and catch the guilty party as well while we look at the evidence. So when you think you know, leave a comment down below. Back in 2003, the internet and speedrunning were very different places, as there were only a handful of games that had communities. Of the few that existed, Mario Kart, GoldenEye, and Doom were the largest, and it's important to understand their proof requirements to grasp how this cheat was pulled off. Doom had perhaps the best method of proof for two reasons. It was a PC game, which made capture easier, and the game would write out input files that could be played back in video form, allowing players to share runs easily. GoldenEye and Mario Kart were a bit different, as full game speedruns weren't a thing in this era. Players competed based on the time you would achieve on each level of the game. Times achieved were normally posted to a forum, with communities largely using the honor system. Aim chats and email chains were the record-keeping technology, with some players even mailing Polaroids of final times back and forth. Video proof wasn't exactly a requirement, but was always appreciated. And as YouTube and other video sharing websites became popular in 2005, you would see more Mario Kart times with video populating the leaderboards until it became mandatory for top runners. As the Mario Kart community grew, so did the need for moderation, and there was nothing that divided players more than how to handle the version differences between PAL and NTSC. The fundamental difference is that the two regional releases ran at different frame rates, with NTSC running at 30 FPS and PAL running at 25 FPS. Your first thought might be that 5 frames a second isn't that big of a deal, but when we're talking about world records, every frame counts, and the difference, although small, meant that NTSC records were 1.2024 times faster than PAL. In gameplay, this translates to a huge advantage if you're playing on PAL, as the slower frame rate made it slightly easier to optimize tracks when lining up mini turbos and race lines. You might be thinking, why didn't North American players just buy a PAL cartridge to level the playing field? But 2003 was a much different time than now. Hardware wasn't as accessible, and it wasn't as simple as obtaining a PAL cartridge. You'd need a PAL N64, a PAL CRT, and a PAL cartridge if you wanted to play at 25 FPS without input lag. Due to these reasons, a divide formed in the community, as the NTSC players became increasingly incensed at the ease the PAL players seemed to set new world records, with their best efforts being bested overnight by the European players. Among the players back in 2003, one stood out above all the others: Michael Jongerius, who would start a career that brought the Mario Kart community to its knees. Submitting his first world record on March 30th of that year on the Rainbow Road 3-lap, it wouldn't take him long before he challenged for the title of champion. The champion distinguishment is the highest honor you can achieve when it comes to Mario Kart 64 time trials. The champ title is awarded by an equation that weighs things such as your average finish across all tracks and number of world records to determine who is the top dog. To become champ, it requires mastery of a majority of the tracks on both fast lap and 3-lap versions, with most champions pouring thousands of hours in to attain the coveted title. Through March to June of 2003, MJ would take 7 more records, with both Bowser Castle times falling to him on June 25th, which is impressive since he set the 3-lap record on that track just the previous day and cut it by 0.28 in less than 24 hours. This put him just one record away from the title of champion, which was currently held by Sammy Chetin. a well-known Super Mario Kart runner and the godfather of the SMK speedrun community. It didn't take MJ much longer to set his next world record either, because 7 days later, he took the Royal Raceway F-lap record from Sammy, which gave him the edge he needed to become champion. To say that MJ's rise to champ was meteoric is an understatement, as he went from having his first world record in March to becoming champ in just over 3 months. If we look at previous champions, we see a different picture, with Sammy setting his first record in April of 1999, but not taking the champ title until mid-2002, and a similar pattern with Steven Juartes setting his first record in 1997, but not becoming champ until the end of 1999. So you're probably thinking, was MJ the cheater? To find out, let's have a look at one of the more common methods of cheating, splicing. A splice is an edited segment of video where a player would take multiple instances of play and piece them together inside of a video editor to present them as a single instance of play, usually with the spliced video showing a world record achievement. Speedrunning has seen its share of splicers over the years, with the earliest known instance coming in 2005 with a 16-star run in Super Mario 64, claimed by HolyMoly2207. His 16-star run was proven to be spliced in 2017, after he decided to brag in the YouTube comments on Cheese's 120-star record, which got the attention of the mods. Upon analysis of the audio, it was found that gaps existed during transitional portions of the run, where the audio would abruptly cut out and then resume, which is one of the largest telltale signs that a run has been spliced. So the question remains, were any of MJ's runs spliced? There's only one record with video proof from MJ's run to become champ, his Calamari Desert 3-lap time. The video is a replay of the record run recorded on a camcorder, so the video quality is very poor, and it lacks audio altogether. Catching a Mario Kart 64 splice doesn't require audio, however, as there are certain gameplay elements that make splicing this game almost impossible. First, time trials are a constant video feed with no loading screens or cut to black, meaning that splices would have to be seamless, but the gameplay UI provides almost impossible challenges to pull this off for 3 reasons. Here's a spliced run I've created. Have a look at the screen as it crosses the finish line going into the second lap. Did you catch that? To successfully splice a time trial run, you would have to line up the position of your character pixel perfect between transitions. Otherwise, you see that noticeable jump. Additionally, look at the course timer and speedometer. To get away with a splice, not only would you need to be in the exact same position, but you would also need to be going the exact same speed and be on the exact same time. If that wasn't bad enough, all of these need to be in perfect alignment on the same frame, or your splice will get caught. So the simple answer is that splicing in Mario Kart 64 is next to impossible. If we do look at MJ's run, it shows him going into the menu after the run to hit the replay. So the chances of this being spliced are very low for an additional reason, as he would have had to splice the run together, then get his N64 to play it somehow, and the technical knowledge for that wasn't readily available in 2003. There's no conclusive proof, or even a suspicion that these early runs of MJ's are cheated or tampered. As mentioned previously, some had video proof, and it was common at the time to post your personal bests to the forum, since the honor system was by and large how the community operated. This is where the next person to challenge for the champ title would come in, Habrick, an NTSC player with exceptional skill, but his rise wasn't quite as meteoric as that of MJ's. Let's have a look. Habrick would join the Mario Kart time trials community in 2002 when he started submitting his first runs to fill out a timesheet on the website. It wouldn't be until 2003 on August 12th that he would achieve his first record, a 2:23.68 on the Royal Raceway 3-lap. After he set his first record, it would be a month to the day when he set his next, this time on the F-lap of Royal Raceway, beating MJ's time by just 0.02 of a second. The Royal Raceway track is a good indicator of just how good these two players were for the time, as their F-lap times were almost a second ahead of the rest of the pack. They would skirmish for the 3-lap record here, with Habrick taking the lead before the end of September. And that's when he set his sights on other tracks. The Luigi Raceway F-Lap, both Koopa Troopa Beach records, and the Wario Stadium F-Lap would all fall to Habrick before the year was over. Coming out of 2003, he had a total of 3 world records, as MJ would take back the Luigi Raceway and KTB F-Laps before the year ended. But this is where things get interesting. After several weeks of inactivity, Habrick would take the KTB F-Lap back in February. Then, through to June, he would slowly gain on total records, getting all the way up to 8, despite losing 2 to MJ earlier in the month. Then, on June 17th, something spectacular would happen. For the second and last time in Mario Kart 64 non-shortcut history, Habrick would set a 3-lap and F-lap record in the same run. The track? Wario Stadium. The previous record to accomplish this feat? Sammy Chetin's 3-lap record of 2:24.52, which had an F-lap time of 1:27.45 on the opening lap. The track? Wario Stadium. And it was this very record that Habrick broke. Back-to-back double records. Wario Stadium is a difficult course for a few reasons. It has multiple tight corners and hill sections that are hard to line up, and due to its length, there are lots of places to pull off mini turbos, where you perform a drift to build charge, then release it for a small boost, which add more complexity to an already challenging track. These factors make it physically and mentally tough to grind out attempts, but this didn't stop Habrick, crushing Sammy Chetin's 3-lap record by half a second, and improving the F-lap by a 1/10 of a second. With so much raw talent, Habrick would claim the title of champion just 2 months later on August 13th, 2004, exactly 1 day over a year after he submitted his first record, taking the Bowser Castle and Toad's Turnpike 3-lap records to seal the deal. Given that so many amazing feats were happening, you're probably wondering if Habrick was submitting fake runs, and there's another method of cheating that we should look at: tassing. TAS stands for Tool Assisted Speedrun, and they are completed using external tools such as input files and macros that perform prearranged inputs to play the game. They are more used for exhibitions of what's possible in a game, often showcasing strategies not possible by humans, or showing the absolute limit of what a player could achieve. Sometimes players with less than honorable intentions will submit a task to a leaderboard in an attempt to claim a world record, sometimes going so far as pretending to play the task run live in an attempt to appear legitimate, as was the case with Lee SDA in Yoshi's Island. To task Mario Kart 64, you would need 2 things: an emulator and a piece of software to prepare the inputs for the emulator. These did exist back in 2004, but they were very scarce and only a handful of people knew how to create them, as the first task videos were just starting to get published by Biscuit on the task videos website he founded. For the sake of argument, let's assume that Habrick did understand how these tools work, and that he could task runs. Could his runs with video in 2004 be tasked? The answer again is likely no, for 2 reasons. If Habrick did create a task back in this era, he would have to capture the video feed from the emulator, which would have been very high quality, as you can see from the on-screen example playing now. This would have immediately flagged the video as suspicious, as most videos submitted back then were copied from VHS tapes and weren't of the best quality. There is a potential workaround. Create the task on PC, then transfer the data to the N64 and record the footage there with a VHS or camcorder. This would create the quality of footage moderators expected back in the day, but there's one problem with this. To get the footage from the emulator to the N64, you'd need a DEX drive. DEX drives were third-party peripherals that allowed you to read memory card data from N64 and PS1 memory cards on PC. They were first produced in 1997, so they did exist when Habrick was running. But you then run into the same problem as before. Even if he had a DEX drive, he'd need the technical knowledge of using a task to produce the cheated run, which wasn't readily available. Beyond what I just outlined, there were other ways to catch an emulated or tasked run from back in the early era, as they were submitted to the leaderboard, but these are secrets the mods keep to themselves to easily identify would-be cheaters, and I won't be going into them here. After Habrick became champion in August, MJ would take the title back just a month later when he set 6 records in a week, with 3 occurring on the same day. Habrick would continue to set records, but he'd never regain the title of champion, setting a few top times in 2005, but never enough to edge out MJ for the top spot. If you're wondering who cheated and can't quite figure out who it was, don't worry. The community at the time had no idea or suspicions that anything was amiss, since neither runner had anything suspicious in their video submissions. And even under today's scrutiny, nothing has been found. So if nobody was cheating runs, what happened? When MJ reclaimed the title, the rivalry appeared to be over, and everything seemed to be quiet in the community, until July 2005, one of the most infamous days in Mario Kart 64 history, because the cheater was revealed. Habrick would release a video where they confessed to cheating. That's right, they. Because Habrick wasn't a single person, but rather 3 people.
We're all Eric Habrick.
Consisting of 3 real-life friends, the Habtrio, as they came to be called, were all submitting times under one name, allowing them each to specialize on a few select tracks to increase their chances of amassing world records quickly. The confession video is filled with comedy, jokes, copyrighted music, and this iconic line.
MJ's a chump!
It was certainly crafted to be entertaining, unless you were MJ, where you learned that your biggest rival was actually a collective. They do cite the PAL advantage as the reason why they did this, as the burden of skill required for one person to beat MJ's records on an NTSC version was so great that they didn't feel it was possible. But we're left with one big question. What happened after this video was released? The fallout from this stunt would be large, as the community was left with a few problems to deal with. What would happen to the times that were driven, as none of them were fake, and each was a legit world record in its own right? And what should happen to the championship reign of Habrick? Observing the breakdown of who drove on which track, Habrick himself only drove the 2 Moo Farm records, with Troy and Luke driving on the other tracks. It was clear that these 2 were the powerhouses of the trio. If you look at the records set between these 2, a few of them stick out. First, Troy's Royal Raceway 3-lap of 2:23.99 is the longest lasting 3-lap non-shortcut record, and it's just 76 days behind MJ's KTB F-lap for total duration, meaning it's the second longest lasting record for non-shortcut overall. Troy's 1:36.68 on the Choco Mountain 3-lap is also considered to be one of the most impressive times ever driven when you regard the era it was driven in and the fact that it was on NTSC, as it lasted for 7 years before MJ would take it back. Let's also not forget Luke's Mario Raceway F-lap record as well, a time that he came back to defend over the years, with his final record coming in 2008, which remained unbroken until 2015. It seemed too harsh to banish these amazing times from history given how strong they were, so the community reached this decision. The players that drove the times were given credit for them, but Habrick's reign as champion was stricken from the record books, restoring MJ as the unbroken champ since he first took the crown. The big question left was, how do we prevent this from happening in the future, as assuming an identity was an undetectable crime in this era. Streaming didn't exist yet, so the mods couldn't place an all times must be driven live requirement on them for future records, and the question of how do we prevent this was on everyone's mind. That question wouldn't get an answer, and surprisingly, no one would try it again, or if they did, they didn't have much success, as MJ's reign would continue until 2013, when Matthias Rustemeyer would dethrone him. If you want to hear that part of the story, check out the documentary I made on Matthias and Dan Burbank, the 2 current top time trialers. In today's landscape, pulling off this type of cheat would be almost impossible, as world record level players are generally required to livestream their attempts. With the further optimization of times, it's also incredibly unlikely that 3 new players could even come close to pulling this off, as it takes tens of thousands of hours to attain the skill required to perform world record level runs. If you took a look at the current record history boards, you may have had a guess as to what happened, since Habrick's name isn't on the tracks we looked at. And if you guessed correctly that Habrick was the cheater, let me know below. And bonus points if you figured out the method ahead of time. I do release shorter videos exclusively on Twitter periodically, so be sure to follow me there for exclusive updates. And if you'd like to join the community, be sure to join the Discord or consider subscribing on Patreon. Until next time.